The Taurite homeworld burned under the relentless assault of the Zorgan invaders, a species known for their merciless campaigns of total extermination. Cities were reduced to rubble, and the streets ran red with the blood of Taurite civilians, slaughtered without mercy as the Zorgan advanced. The Taurites, a peaceful race unaccustomed to the brutality of war, had never faced an enemy so bent on their complete annihilation. Their defenses, though valiant, were crumbling under the weight of the Zorgan onslaught. Commander Indus, a seasoned leader with years of experience, watched in despair as his weary soldiers were pushed back on all fronts. The once vibrant cities of the Taurite homeworld were now smoldering ruins, and Indus knew that unless he could find allies to turn the tide, his people would be wiped out. But so far, none of the galactic powers dared to defy the Zorgan. The galaxy had watched in silence as the Taurites faced their doom, unwilling to risk the wrath of the Zorgan by intervening. It was a dark time, and hope seemed all but lost. Until one day, a transmission arrived from an unexpected source. Earth. The message was brief but clear. The humans, who had remained neutral in the sprawling galactic conflicts until now, had decided to intervene. Earth had stayed out of the interstellar wars, focusing on its own development and avoiding entanglements with other species. But as the horrors of the Zorgan invasion became known, a debate had raged among Earth's leaders. Should they continue to observe from afar, or should they step in to help those in need? The decision was not an easy one, but in the end, humanity's sense of justice prevailed. They could not stand idly by while an entire species was exterminated. And so an elite team of Earth's finest soldiers was dispatched to the Taurite homeworld. Their leader, Samuel Rice, was a man of conviction, driven by a deep sense of duty and morality. He had argued passionately that humans had a moral imperative to help those in need and to oppose tyranny wherever it arose. His superiors had agreed, and now Samuel and his team stood before Commander Indus, ready to offer their assistance in the Taurite's darkest hour. Indus, a tall, imposing figure with the characteristic gray skin and elongated features of his species, eyed the humans skeptically. These strange bipedal apes from a distant and relatively primitive world were offering their help. Indus had heard of humans, of course, but he had never expected to see them involved in a conflict of this scale. He wondered what had driven them to step forward when so many others had turned their backs. But as Samuel laid out his tactical knowledge and displayed the advanced weaponry Earth had secretly developed, a glimmer of hope stirred in the battle-weary commander's heart. Perhaps, just perhaps, these humans could make a difference. Together, Indus and Samuel hatched a desperate plan. The latest intelligence indicated that a massive Zorgan fleet was preparing to strike the Talos asteroid belt, a region of space that housed a critical Taurite outpost. If the Zorgan took control of the Talos system, the last remnants of Taurite defenses would crumble and their homeworld would be left vulnerable to total destruction. The only chance of stopping the Zorgan was to ambush them amidst the tumbling rocks of the asteroid field, where the humans' advanced technology and the Taurites' strategic brilliance could be put to the ultimate test. It would be a vicious, bloody battle, but with the help of the human strike team, they might just prevail. As the fleet traveled to the Talos system, Samuel learned the true stakes of the war. Indus shared with him the horrifying details of the Zorgan campaign. The Zorgan were not simply seeking conquest, they were intent on the complete and utter extermination of the Taurite race. Families, civilians, children, the Zorgan would butcher them all without hesitation. The sickening revelation filled the humans with a grim purpose. They readied themselves for the battle ahead, knowing that here, among these spinning asteroids, the fate of an entire species would be decided. There could be no retreat, no surrender. They had to hold the line against genocide or watch a world burn and a people perish. The Talos system was a chaotic jumble of spinning rocks, a dangerous environment for any fleet. But it was here, amidst the tumbling asteroids, that the Taurites and humans made their stand. The Zorgan fleet shimmered into existence, a vast armada of gleaming warships ready to crush the Taurite resistance once and for all. On the bridge of his cloaked vessel, Samuel tensed, his hand hovering over the weapons controls. Beside him, Indus studied the tactical display, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The Zorgan ships advanced, their hulls bristling with weapons, moving with the arrogance of a force accustomed to easy victories. They were unaware of the trap that lay in wait. Samuel had spent weeks studying the Zorgans' tactics, identifying their weaknesses, and now, as the Zorgan fleet moved closer, he knew the moment had come. "Now," Samuel barked, his voice sharp with urgency. In an instant, the Taurite human fleet decloaked, appearing as if from nowhere amidst the tumbling asteroids. Before the Zorgan could react, a barrage of weapons fire slammed into their flanks. Explosions blossomed along the hulls of the enemy warships, the initial strike crippling several vessels and sending the rest into chaos. The Taurites and humans had struck with precision, exploiting the element of surprise to devastating effect. But the battle was far from over. The Zorgan, though caught off guard, were not defeated. Their fleet was massive, their ships heavily armored, and their crews well-trained. They regrouped quickly, launching a counterattack with brutal efficiency. The asteroid field became a hellscape of crisscrossing weapons fire and spinning debris. Ships on both sides were hammered, hulls cracking open and venting atmosphere into the void. But still, the Allies pressed on, their newfound unity forging a bond in the crucible of war. Samuel led the charge, his elite soldiers surging forward in advanced armor, their weapons spitting plasma. They sliced through the enemy's defenses, overwhelming the Zorgan crew with their speed and ferocity. In a matter of minutes, they had seized control of a key warship, its formidable guns now turned against its former allies. Indus watched the humans fight, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. These humans, whom he had once doubted, were proving to be formidable warriors, their determination and skill unmatched. With a roar of defiance, Indus rallied his own troops. The Taurite fighters swarmed the larger Zorgan battleships like angry hornets, targeting the weak points the humans had identified. Their precision strikes ripped through enemy hulls, leaving destruction in their wake. But the Zorgan were relentless. They fought back with a ferocity born of desperation, knowing that this battle could decide the fate of their campaign. The asteroid field was littered with the wreckage of destroyed ships, the debris spinning wildly through the void. The battle raged on, the outcome uncertain as both sides fought with everything they had. Aboard the captured Zorgan ship, Samuel and his team fought their way to the bridge, their path littered with the bodies of fallen enemies. The Zorgan commander, a grizzled veteran named Krax, lunged at Samuel with a roar, his eyes burning with hatred. The two warriors clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand battle, trading blows amidst the chaos of the firefight. Krax was strong, his blows powerful, but Samuel's training and perseverance proved too much. With a final crushing strike, Samuel sent Krax tumbling, the Zorgan commander's body slumping to the deck in defeat. "Bridge secure," Samuel reported, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "The ship is ours." On the console, Indus grinned fiercely, his eyes shining with triumph. "Well done, my friend," he said, his voice filled with pride. But the battle is just getting started. Together, they hatched a desperate plan. The captured Zorgan ship would be their Trojan horse, a way to infiltrate the enemy's flagship and strike at the heart of their command. It was a risky move, but with the Zorgan fleet still reeling from the initial ambush, it was their best chance to end the threat once and for all. The battle outside continued to rage, the Taurite and human forces holding the line against the Zorgan onslaught. Ships on both sides were reduced to twisted wreckage, the debris field growing larger with each passing moment. The odds were against them, but the Allies fought with a determination born of desperation. They knew that if they failed here, the Zorgan would sweep across the galaxy, leaving nothing but death and destruction in their wake. As the captured Zorgan ship approached the enemy flagship, Samuel's team prepared for the final assault. They moved with precision, their advanced armor and weapons giving them an edge over the Zorgan defenders. The flagship loomed ahead, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. Inside, Overlord Zarx awaited, his plans for galactic domination hanging in the balance. The Trojan horse worked perfectly. The captured Zorgan ship was allowed to dock with the flagship, its identity codes fooling the enemy's defenses. Samuel and his team moved quickly, slipping past the initial layers of security and making their way to the heart of the ship. The corridors were eerily silent, the only sounds the faint hum of the ship's systems and the occasional clank of armored boots on the deck. They encountered resistance as they neared the command center, Zorgan soldiers rushing to intercept them. But the humans were prepared, their weapons and tactics superior to the Zorgans. They cut through the enemy ranks with surgical precision, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. The final battle was drawing near, and the tension in the air was palpable. At last, they reached the command center, a vast chamber filled with tactical displays and command consoles. Overlord Zarks stood at its center, a towering figure clad in armor of deepest black. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, his presence radiating power and malevolence. He had been waiting for them. Samuel and Zarks locked eyes, and for a moment the chaos of the battle seemed to fade away. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. With a cry of defiance, Samuel charged, his weapon blazing. Zarks met him head-on, the two leaders clashing in a deadly dance amidst the chaos of the firefight. They traded blows, each seeking an advantage, their movements a blur of speed and power. The fate of billions hung in the balance as they fought, their battle the culmination of all the hatred and conflict that had led to this moment. Zarks was a formidable opponent, his strength and skill unmatched. But Samuel fought with a determination born of desperation, knowing that failure was not an option. The battle raged on, each blow bringing them closer to the edge. The command center was filled with the sounds of battle, the crackle of energy weapons, the clash of steel, the grunts and cries of warriors locked in mortal combat. But in the end, it was Samuel's resolve that proved to be the deciding factor. With a final powerful strike, he brought Zarks to his knees, the Overlord's armor cracking under the force of the blow. Zarks looked up at Samuel, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. He knew that he had been defeated. "You may have won this battle, human," Zarks hissed, his voice filled with venom. "But the war is far from over. My forces will rise again, and when they do, there will be no place in the galaxy where you can hide." Samuel stared down at the fallen Overlord, his expression hard. "We'll be ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. "And we'll fight you again as many times as it takes, until your kind is wiped from the face of the galaxy." With those words, he delivered the final blow, ending Zarks' life and bringing an end to his reign of terror. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. The command center was filled with the bodies of the fallen, both human and Zorgan. The walls were scorched and blackened, the tactical displays shattered and flickering with static. But the Zorgan threat had been eliminated, and the Taurite homeworld was safe. As the news of Zarks' defeat spread through the fleet, a cheer went up from the surviving soldiers. They had won, against all odds. The Zorgan fleet was in disarray, their command structure shattered. The Taurite and human forces moved quickly to mop up the remaining resistance, securing the battlefield and ensuring that the Zorgan could no longer pose a threat. The Battle of Talos had been won, but the victory came at a great cost. The battlefield was littered with the wreckage of ships, the debris of war floating silently through the void. The bodies of the fallen, both Taurite and human, drifted among the debris, a stark reminder of the price that had been paid. Samuel and Indus stood together on the bridge of the captured Zorgan flagship, watching as the last of the Zorgan forces were driven back. They had done it. They had faced the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known, and they had emerged victorious. But as they stood there victorious, they knew that the war was far from over. The Zorgan were a relentless enemy, and though they had been dealt a devastating blow, they would not give up easily. The galaxy was still in danger, and there was much work to be done. Samuel turned to Indus, his expression serious. "We've won the battle, but the war is far from over," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "The Zorgan won't stop until they've been wiped out completely, and that means we can't stop either." Indus nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "We'll keep fighting, Samuel," he said, his voice strong. "We'll fight until every last Zorgan has been eliminated and the galaxy is safe once again." Together, they began to make plans for the next phase of the war. The Zorgan fleet had been shattered, but pockets of resistance remained throughout the galaxy. The Taurite and human forces would need to work together to root out these remnants and ensure that the Zorgan could never rise again. As the fleet prepared to move out, Samuel took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the lives that had been lost, the sacrifices that had been made, and the bonds that had been forged in the heat of battle. The war had been a brutal and bloody affair, but it had also brought out the best in those who fought it. It had shown the strength of the human spirit, the determination to stand up against tyranny, and the willingness to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. And it had shown that, when the galaxy turned its back and all seemed lost, there were still those who had the courage to step forward and fight. The fleet moved out, the captured Zorgan flagship leading the way. They would continue the fight, and they would not rest until the Zorgan were defeated once and for all. As they traveled through the void, Samuel thought of the future. The war had changed him in ways he could not fully understand. He had seen the darkest depths of the galaxy, but he had also seen its brightest stars. He had faced the horrors of war, but he had also seen the power of hope. And he knew that, no matter what the future held, he would continue to fight for that hope. The Battle of Talos had been a turning point, not just for the Taurites and humans, but for the entire galaxy. It had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always a chance for victory, if one had the courage to stand up and fight. The war was not over, but Samuel knew that they had taken the first step towards a brighter future. The galaxy was a dangerous place, filled with darkness and despair, but it was also a place of light, of hope, and of endless possibilities. And as long as there were those who were willing to fight for that light, the darkness would never prevail. The fleet traveled on, heading towards the next battle, the next challenge, the next test of their resolve. They would face it together, as allies, as friends, as brothers in arms. And they would not rest until the galaxy was safe once again. The war would continue, but so would the fight for peace. And as long as there were those who had the courage to act, there would always be hope. The journey through the void was long and fraught with uncertainty, yet it gave Samuel Rice time to reflect on what had transpired and what was still to come. The Zorgan threat had been diminished but not eradicated, and the galaxy remained in a state of heightened alert. The captured Zorgan flagship, now under the control of the Taurite-Human Alliance, became a symbol of hope, yet it also carried the heavy burden of the war's remaining dangers. As they moved toward their next objective, Samuel's thoughts often drifted to the faces of the fallen comrades and the civilians they had fought to protect. The memory of Overlord Zarx's final words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that the Zorgan menace, though beaten back, was not entirely vanquished. The galaxy was vast, and its darkness deep, and within those shadowy expanses, the remnants of the Zorgan forces were likely regrouping, planning their next move. Samuel knew that his role in this war was far from over. He was no longer just a soldier, but a leader, a beacon for those who looked to him for guidance in these perilous times. The next target on their mission was a system deep within Zorgan-controlled space, rumored to be a stronghold where surviving Zorgan forces had gathered. The intelligence gathered from the captured flagship indicated that this location could be the key to either ending the war or prolonging it indefinitely. If they could strike a decisive blow here, it might cripple the Zorgan's ability to wage further campaigns, but the risks were immense. The system was heavily fortified, and the Zorgan were known for their cunning and ruthlessness. Samuel and Indus spent countless hours in strategy sessions, planning every detail of the assault. The combined strengths of human and Taurite forces had proven effective, but this would be their greatest challenge yet. The enemy was cornered, desperate, and that made them all the more dangerous. As they neared their destination, the fleet's mood grew tense. The soldiers knew what lay ahead, and the weight of the mission bore heavily on them. Samuel addressed the fleet in a broadcast that was transmitted to every ship, his voice calm yet resolute. "We stand at the precipice of a great challenge," he began, "but we do not stand alone. We are united in purpose, in strength, and in the belief that what we do here today will echo through the annals of history. The Zorgan sought to divide us, to spread fear and chaos across the stars, but they underestimated the resolve of those who fight for freedom, for justice, and for the right to live without the shadow of tyranny. Today, we will show them that as long as there is breath in our bodies, we will not falter. We will stand together, and we will emerge victorious." The fleet emerged from hyperspace on the edge of the target system, and what they saw confirmed their worst fears. The Zorgan stronghold was more than just a fortified base. It was a veritable fortress, bristling with defensive emplacements, surrounded by a fleet of warships, and protected by a dense field of mines and automated turrets. The scale of the defenses was staggering, and for a moment even the most seasoned of warriors felt a pang of doubt. But Samuel's voice cut through the static of fear like a knife, reminding them of the stakes and the lives that depended on their success. The battle began with a ferocity that took even the Zorgan by surprise. The Allied fleet, under the expert coordination of Samuel and Indus, launched a multi-pronged attack, using hit-and-run tactics to draw out the Zorgan defenses while probing for weaknesses. The Taurite ships, with their superior agility, darted through the minefields, clearing paths for the heavier human cruisers that followed in their wake. The Zorgan fought back with everything they had, but they were on the defensive, and the Alliance exploited this to its fullest. The battle quickly escalated into a chaotic melee, with ships weaving through the battlefield in a deadly dance of fire and maneuver. Explosions lit up the void as ships on both sides were destroyed, their wreckage adding to the debris that cluttered the space around the stronghold. Inside the command center of the captured flagship, Samuel and Indus directed the battle with cold precision, issuing orders and adapting to the rapidly changing situation. They knew that brute force alone would not win the day. They needed to outthink the Zorgan, to outmaneuver them and exploit their weaknesses. The key to victory lay in breaching the fortress itself, and for that, they needed a distraction. Samuel devised a bold plan, one that would require both cunning and courage. He ordered a portion of the fleet to feign a retreat, drawing the Zorgan ships away from the stronghold. As the enemy pursued, the remaining Allied ships would launch a direct assault on the fortress, using the captured Zorgan flagship as the spearhead. It was a risky maneuver, but it was their best shot at breaking through the enemy's defenses. The plan worked to perfection. The Zorgan, believing they had the upper hand, took the bait and pursued the retreating ships, leaving the fortress vulnerable. Samuel led the charge, piloting the flagship through a hail of enemy fire, its shields glowing with the impact of countless hits. The fortress loomed ahead, its defenses still formidable, but with the enemy fleet temporarily out of position, they had a window of opportunity. The final approach was harrowing. The fortress's automated turrets unleashed a barrage of firepower that threatened to overwhelm the flagship's shields. But the human and Taurite crews worked in unison, countering each threat as it arose, and slowly but surely they closed the distance. The moment of truth came when the flagship reached the outer wall of the fortress. Samuel gave the order, and the ship's massive plasma cannons fired in unison, blasting a hole in the fortress's defenses. The breach was narrow, but it was enough. The Allied boarding teams, comprised of the best soldiers from both species, stormed the breach, fighting their way into the heart of the fortress. Inside, the battle took on a new dimension. The Zorgan defenders were fanatical in their resistance, fighting with the desperation of those who knew that defeat meant certain death. The corridors of the fortress were filled with the sounds of battle, blaster fire, the clash of metal, the shouts and screams of the wounded and dying. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics. Samuel led the charge, his heart pounding with the intensity of the fight. He knew that the outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the galaxy. There was no room for error, no time for hesitation. Every move had to be calculated, every shot precise. As they pushed deeper into the fortress, the resistance grew fiercer. The Zorgan had prepared for this, and their traps and ambushes took a heavy toll on the attackers. But the Allied forces were relentless, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. They fought their way through waves of defenders, clearing room by room until they reached the central command hub. It was here that the final battle would be fought, where the fate of the Zorgan stronghold, and possibly the entire war, would be decided. The command hub was a vast, circular chamber filled with advanced technology and tactical displays. At its center was a raised platform where the Zorgan commander directed the battle. Samuel recognized him immediately. It was Xarx's second-in-command, a brutal and cunning tactician known as Vorkal. Vorkal had taken command after Xarx's death, and under his leadership, the Zorgan had regrouped and fortified their remaining strongholds. He was a formidable opponent, and Samuel knew that this battle would not be won easily. The two forces clashed in the center of the command hub, a swirling melee of soldiers and droids locked in a fight to the death. Samuel's team fought with the ferocity of those who knew they had everything to lose. The Zorgan defenders, though outnumbered, fought with a grim determination, knowing that this was their last stand. The air crackled with energy as blaster bolts flew back and forth, and the sound of metal on metal rang out as soldiers engaged in close combat. Samuel pushed forward, his eyes locked on Vorkal. The Zorgan commander stood on the platform, directing his forces with a cold, calculating precision. He was surrounded by a personal guard of elite warriors, each one a match for any soldier in the Allied forces. But Samuel was not deterred. He fought his way through the ranks of defenders, his blaster cutting down anyone who stood in his way. As he reached the platform, Vorkal turned to face him, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Your efforts are futile, human," Vorkal hissed, his voice filled with contempt. "You may have killed Zarks, but you will not stop the Zorgan. We are Legion, and we will rise again. This galaxy will be ours." Samuel leveled his blaster at Vorkal, his face set in grim determination. "Not while I draw breath," he replied, his voice steady. "The Zorgan's reign of terror ends here." With a roar, Vorkal leapt from the platform, his claws extended as he lunged at Samuel. The two warriors met in midair, their bodies colliding with a force that sent them both crashing to the ground. The battle around them paused for a moment as the two leaders engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Vorkal was strong, his blows powerful, but Samuel was faster, his training and determination giving him the edge. They traded blows, each seeking an advantage, but in the end, it was Samuel who emerged victorious. With a final, decisive strike, Samuel drove his blade into Vorkal's chest, piercing the Zorgan's black heart. Vorkal let out a final blood-curdling scream as his life force drained away. The Zorgan commander fell to the ground, his body crumpling in defeat. The command hub fell silent. The surviving Zorgan soldiers frozen in shock as they watched their leader die. Samuel stood over Vorkal's body, his chest heaving with exertion, but his resolve unbroken. The battle was over. The Zorgan stronghold had fallen. With the death of Vorkal, the remaining Zorgan forces quickly surrendered. The fortress was secured, and the Allied forces moved in to dismantle its defenses and secure any valuable intelligence. The victory was complete, but the cost had been high. Many brave soldiers had given their lives in the fight, and their loss was keenly felt by those who survived. Samuel stood on the platform in the command hub, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The once pristine chamber was now a scene of destruction, littered with the bodies of the fallen and the wreckage of the battle. The victory was theirs, but it was bittersweet. As the news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, celebrations erupted on countless worlds. The Zorgan, who had once seemed unstoppable, had been dealt a crippling blow. The tide of the war had turned, and for the first time there was hope that the Zorgan threat could be eliminated once and for all. But Samuel knew that the war was not over. The Zorgan were a resilient enemy, and there were still pockets of resistance scattered across the galaxy. The fight would continue, but with each victory, they were one step closer to ending the Zorgan menace. In the days that followed, the Allied forces consolidated their gains and prepared for the next phase of the campaign. Samuel and Indus worked tirelessly to rebuild their forces, training new recruits and devising strategies for the battles to come. They knew that the Zorgan would not give up easily, and that the road to victory would be long and arduous. But they also knew that they had something the Zorgan did not: the unbreakable bond of unity and the determination to fight for a just cause. As the fleet prepared to move out to their next objective, Samuel took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. He thought of the lives that had been lost, the sacrifices that had been made, and the friendships that had been forged in the fires of war. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was also a place of hope and endless possibilities. And as long as there were those who were willing to fight for that hope, the darkness would never prevail. The fleet moved on, heading toward the next battle, the next challenge, the next test of their resolve. They would face it together, as allies, as friends, as brothers in arms. And they would not rest until the galaxy was safe once again. The war would continue, but so would the fight for peace. And as long as there were those who had the courage to act, there would always be hope. The campaign continued for many months, each battle a test of their resolve and strength. The Zorgan, though weakened, fought with a ferocity that belied their dwindling numbers. They launched desperate counterattacks, ambushes, and guerrilla strikes, attempting to wear down the Allied forces. But each time, they were met with a wall of determination and unity that they could not break. Samuel and Indus led their forces from one victory to the next, steadily pushing the Zorgan back, reclaiming world after world that had fallen under the shadow of their tyranny. The war was brutal and unrelenting. The Zorgan showed no mercy, and the Allies were forced to match their ruthlessness with their own resolve. The battles were fought in space and on the ground, in the void of the stars and in the cities of countless worlds. The toll on the soldiers was immense, both physically and mentally, but the promise of peace and the knowledge that they were fighting for the freedom of the galaxy kept them going, even in the darkest moments. During one particularly fierce battle on a barren, wind-swept world, Samuel found himself face to face with one of the Zorgan's most feared commanders, a monstrous being known as General Crag. Crag was a behemoth of a creature, towering over Samuel with a body encased in thick black armor. His presence was terrifying, and his reputation as a butcher of worlds was well earned. The battle between them was intense, a clash of wills and strength that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Crag fought with a savage fury, each strike of his massive weapon threatening to crush Samuel where he stood. But Samuel was quick, his movements precise, his training honed to perfection by months of relentless combat. He dodged and parried, looking for an opening, a weakness in Crag's defenses. The battle raged on, each combatant driven by the knowledge that this fight could determine the outcome of the entire war. Finally, Samuel saw his chance. Crag, in his overconfidence, left a small gap in his defense, and Samuel seized the opportunity. With a swift, powerful strike, he drove his blade into the gap, piercing the armor and striking at the heart of the beast within. Crag let out a roar of pain and fury, his massive body shuddering as the life drained out of him. The monstrous general fell to the ground, his body crashing down with a thunderous impact. The battle was over, and with Crag's death, the Zorgan forces on the planet quickly fell into disarray. The Allied forces swept through the remaining defenses, securing the planet and dealing another crushing blow to the Zorgan war machine. The victory was celebrated across the galaxy, but Samuel felt no joy in the death of Crag. The war had taken its toll on him, and he was haunted by the faces of those he had killed, the countless lives lost in the pursuit of peace. He knew that each victory brought them closer to the end of the war, but it also weighed heavily on his soul. The burden of command, the responsibility for so many lives, was a heavy one, and it only grew heavier with each passing day. But there was no time to dwell on the past. The war was still raging, and the Zorgan were still a threat. Samuel knew that he could not rest until the job was done, until the Zorgan were defeated once and for all. And so he pressed on, leading his forces from one battle to the next, always with the goal of ending the war and bringing peace to the galaxy. The final campaign against the Zorgan was launched with the full might of the Allied forces. Every ship, every soldier, every resource was brought to bear against the last remaining Zorgan stronghold, a massive fortress hidden deep within an uncharted region of space. The fortress was protected by layers of defenses, from minefields and automated turrets to a fleet of warships that had been lying in wait. It was the Zorgan's last stand, their final attempt to hold on to their power and control. The Allied fleet, led by Samuel and Indus, approached the stronghold with caution. They knew that this would be the most difficult battle they had ever faced, but they were ready. The soldiers were battle-hardened, their resolve unshakable, their belief in their cause stronger than ever. They knew that the fate of the galaxy depended on the outcome of this battle, and they were prepared to give everything they had to secure victory. The battle began with a massive exchange of fire, the two fleets clashing in a violent storm of weapons and explosions. The void was filled with the light of battle, as ships exploded and debris scattered across the battlefield. The Allied forces pushed forward, determined to breach the Zorgan defenses and reach the fortress. The Zorgan fought back with everything they had, launching wave after wave of attacks in a desperate bid to hold their ground. As the battle raged on, Samuel and Indus devised a daring plan to end the conflict once and for all. They would lead a strike team into the heart of the fortress, targeting the central power core that sustained the entire structure. If they could destroy the core, the fortress would be crippled, and the Zorgan forces would be left vulnerable. It was a dangerous mission, but it was their best chance to end the war. The strike team, comprised of the best soldiers from both human and Taurite forces, infiltrated the fortress under the cover of the fleet's assault. They fought their way through the corridors of the fortress, encountering fierce resistance at every turn. The Zorgan defenders, knowing that this was their last chance to survive, fought with a savage desperation that matched the intensity of the Allied forces. The final confrontation took place in the core chamber, a massive, pulsating structure that radiated energy and power. The Zorgan had fortified the chamber with their most elite soldiers, and the battle that ensued was one of the most intense of the entire war. Samuel led the charge, his blade cutting through the enemy ranks as he fought his way to the core. Indus, fighting by his side, provided cover, his blaster firing with deadly precision. The battle reached its climax as the strike team reached the core. Samuel, his body battered and his strength nearly spent, activated the detonation sequence. The core began to overload, its energy building to catastrophic levels. The Zorgan defenders, realizing what was happening, launched a final desperate attack, but it was too late. The core detonated in a massive explosion, ripping through the fortress and destroying everything in its path. The shockwave from the explosion was felt across the battlefield, as the fortress crumbled and the Zorgan fleet was left in disarray. The Allied forces, sensing victory, pressed the attack, overwhelming the remaining Zorgan ships and securing the battlefield. The war was over. The Zorgan had been defeated. As the dust settled and the battlefield grew quiet, Samuel stood amidst the ruins of the fortress, his body bruised and battered, but his spirit unbroken. He had done what he had set out to do. He had led the forces of the galaxy to victory over the Zorgan, ending their reign of terror and bringing peace to the stars.